Alan Baker, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so this is really cool. I think this is the second or third time we've had a martial artist, but your background is very different from those. And so looking at we've obviously just met just recently and just been catching up just now. I'm really interested to find out a bit about how this started your career in martial arts, what you're doing today, how you came to be where you are today. What kicked all this off, Alan?
Well, I was a rowdy youth. Probably a handful for mom. Yeah. So in order to contain my energy or to direct it, I was a very energetic kid.
Come on, give us some examples. What does rowdy mean? What were you getting up to that you shouldn't have been?
I got in a lot of fights in school. I didn't behave too well. I didn't, listen too much. Did my own thing. Having so much energy when I was a kid was a big problem. I didn't need to sleep when I was a kid. My mom to this day complains because I didn't want to go to sleep. I felt like I was going to miss something. So it's a challenge just to get me to go to bed. And, mixed with a little bit of a mean streak, I guess you would say, at that age. Those two combinations was trouble.
Okay.
Difficult to handle. So one of the things she did in order to help with that was to try to introduce me to the local martial arts program, and I fell in love with it immediately. I still remember to this day, the first class, the instructor had two sons who were in the class as well. And normally you don't end up sparring on the first day, but I guess I deserved it. And I ended up sparring with his two sons, and they just beat me to death. And I remember that to this day, but I loved it. I didn't get in trouble. I could go to the school and I could get that aggressive energy out, and it was okay.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting because I'd imagine, you'll be able to tell me better because of your experience, but I imagine that a lot of kids in that position would go the opposite way. Their first experience of martial arts getting beaten up could mean that they would not want to go back next week, So I suppose everyone
got beat up and I deserved every bit of it. Fortunately, I enjoyed it. I loved it. I liked the environment, the challenge. And even at that time, I didn't understand how it trains you to deal with challenge. But it was doing it for me. It was, one of the biggest things is teaching me respect. I still remember to this day, bowing, getting introduced to the concept of saluting and bowing into a exchange and out of an exchange. And everything was okay after that. In real life, things aren't okay after a fight, but here is someone that's willing to train with you and allow you to, express yourself physically, which, a lot of kids have a hard time with that. If they have that maybe a little bit of aggressive energy, and they ended up getting into a lot of trouble that sticks with them for life outside of the academy. So they can come into the academy, express that, and learn to deal with it. And that's pretty powerful. Not to mention the growth opportunities that come along with that as you walk the path, as you go through the journey.
Yeah, that respect element of martial arts. I mean, there really is nothing that compares with that, is there? Particularly for young people that maybe need to kind of get their discipline in place and be able to learn those life principles. There's just nothing that comes close. obviously that hit you hard, that first experience of bowing and showing the respect. How did that impact you?
Well, you know, the one thing it did do was introduce the concepts that I didn't see on the surface. You know, on the surface, I'm learning to fight, some cool techniques, you know, and follow that process. But that information that you learn on the edge of the mat or in between class, that was like my first introduction to that idea is, hey, you know, this is what respect is. And, you know, you have to give it in order to receive it. It's not a one-way street.
Mm.
You have to create an environment of respect with this person. And then you go and you meet another person. It's not automatic. It takes time and effort to build respect with that person. It's a continuous exercise that you're going to have to do with everyone. And sometimes, you know, you don't do it so good. Step back and you go, you know what, I should do that better. You know, I can, maybe I sense that that person is not giving me that respect. And the question right away is, did I demonstrate it? Did I properly give them that amount of respect? And, you know, you can check it and go fix that. That's all the time inside the academy and on the mat. You're constantly doing that. And then underneath that, you're dealing with your ego, anger, any type of emotional challenge. That's all under the surface of those things, you know, and you get introduced to self-control. Right. And like you said, discipline, which that word's thrown around a lot, but there's so much in that atmosphere, that culture creates and helps you learn, helps you educate yourself in it.
Nice. So that first experience started the journey, and then I'm guessing you started competing. Was that the next kind of step for you?
Well, the next thing, I mean, I fell in love with it. I wanted more. And I was in a small town at that time. I think there might have been 3 or 4 schools.
Are we talking jiu-jitsu or what martial art? Because I've seen a plethora of different stuff on your YouTube. So I've seen like the Gracie brothers, like.
Yep. At that time, it was Ishinru, and there was a Taekwondo school, and then there was a Burmese Bondo school, which was very unique. I didn't realize it at that time, but there wasn't that many of them. And there was a small judo school. And when I got to the point where I could work and make some money, that's the only reason I wanted to work at that time, is I wanted to join all the schools and learn. And you know, I thought the culture was incredible. I wanted more of it. So probably before any type of competition, it was just getting more involved in it. And, you know, you meet fellow martial artists and start training and that type of thing. So I really didn't get into competing until probably late teens, early 20s. And at that time, you know, you would go to maybe a national event. If you did anything local, it was a bad man contest. They didn't have the UFC at that time. You know, you would a local bar would buy a ring and either put it in a parking lot or put it over in the corner of the bar.
Oh, really? Wow.
And then Friday night, you could sign up and get in a ring. Half of the guys there, probably more than half, were drunk. And I mean, people would get in and you just go. So you would have some organized events that you could get involved with the schools. And then you had stuff like that.
Sounds like a real life version of the World Wrestling Federation.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of that, you know, when the UFC started coming out, that seemed to fade away. And, you know, everyone started going toward mixed martial arts.
Were you at this? Were you like? Well, where was your career when UFC really kicked off? Would that have been something that you would have been interested in getting involved in, had its, UFC? Well, it's been around a while now, hasn't it? But it's, yeah.
Well, I remember I was teaching. I think I was working between two academies, and when I first got introduced to it, I immediately wanted to get more involved in the grappling element. So the avenues I was fortunate to be introduced to, like Erik Paulson, Jean-Jacques Machado. I would travel to LA, and Jean-Jacques would teach at the instructor camps at Guro Don School. And then Erik Paulson, I met him actually at a Dan Inosanto seminar. And after that, I started traveling to California to find him. And then later on, got introduced to Pedro Sauer. And the rest is history.
Right. So when did you, what year we're talking when you set up your first school?
First one, when I got introduced to doing it full time, was in the early 90s.
Wow.
And I'd met a gentleman who he had ran them previously, and he was getting ready to open a school, and he was looking for someone to work the head instructor position. And that's when I started getting introduced to the professional side of it. Until you get introduced to that, you think, well, I just have to be a good martial artist, and it'll just come to you. He introduced me to the fact that you have to learn how to answer the phone correctly. You have to know how to do program design and curriculum development, customer service, that whole side of it. And once I got introduced to it, I've always had a very inquisitive nature. Once I get introduced to an idea, I start looking for more information. I've always been a big self-educator. So as soon as he introduced me to it, I immediately started looking for mentors to help me get better at it. I knew I wanted to be in the industry, and it was obvious at that time that that's what it was going to take, is to learn those skills and be able to implement them in any academy that you're going to have moving forward. So what's
been some of the biggest challenges you've had over the years how long is it now since, so 90s, so we're talking a while, like 30 years of we're talking close to 30 years of running a school. So you've obviously learned a lot in that time about how to run a successful martial arts school as well as a business. What have been some key takeaways as well as some of the biggest challenges?
Well, there's a common theme in the martial arts industry. I'm going to build my school. I'm going to get 400 students, and everything be okay after that. And that's the carrot that people chase. And it's not that it isn't obtainable, but not everybody gets there. So I probably chased that carrot for the first 10 years. And then I was fortunate to get mentors that were just in business in general. And they introduced the idea that, I needed to develop multiple revenue streams. And that's when I started to back up and take a look at what I was designing as far as a business structure that was going to support the lifestyle you wanted to achieve. And so I started looking at multiple ways to build revenue streams, and that came much quicker. It's actually one of the things that I coach now when I'm working with different school owners that are getting started. The two options, one is chase the carrot, and the other one is to intelligently design your business plan to include those multiple revenue streams. Some will make it, some will don't. As an entrepreneur, you know that. But you have to try. Failure is a huge part of any success. So don't be afraid of it, expect it. And when it comes, go right around it and to the next goal. So that is one of the huge things that changed everything for me, is starting to look at building those additional businesses and running them and building a lifestyle that would support the ability to run them all at once.
And I assume that when you're looking at, you're sitting down and you're saying, right, this is my plan. I want to, rather than, like you say, just chasing the carrot, I'm going to, map out a plan for multiple streams. You're looking at multiple streams of business services that you're really passionate about and you have the knowledge around, and it's not just about just setting something up just to open up the stream, but something that you really feel you can impact, right?
Right. For me, finding the niche where I can be effective and be helpful. I knew it at that time I wanted to be in this industry. So the academy was obviously first, and the second leg was the tactical side of the business. So we put together a tactical business that trains law enforcement, military, personal protection agents. And we have programs that we offer them, but the main thing that business did was it designed programs specifically around the environments of those cultures, which solves a lot of problems, because sometimes martial arts does not fit into a law enforcement culture.
That's interesting. Yeah, can you give some examples, so like of an environment where the programming design would be so much different from a different environment? Like, what sort of things do you have to take into account? What's the thinking around that?
Well, like now you have to take into consideration how everything looks, because there's cameras everywhere, there's phones everywhere. And your actions have to be socially acceptable and visually correct. You also have to follow a force continuum. You can't elevate. Your job is to de-escalate. So that element has to be in there. And it varies by state. You also will have your boss's rules, which will vary per department, but they're going to allow you to do some things. They'll say, I don't want you to do this. You have to take into consideration the kit, the gear you're going to have on. Sometimes a lot of the vest and additional gear make you very top heavy. You have to take into consideration the different environments. For instance, like a lot of the guys I work with, they are in and around vehicles. So a lot of the techniques they have to learn to use between two cars, or between a building and a car. They have to take the space into consideration. So a lot of systems do not do that. They also have to have the gift of gab, the ability to verbally communicate, and they have to be able to train those abilities just like they do their physical tools. They have some commands they'll give, but the ability to speak and control a situation before touch happens is an art unto itself. And most martial arts don't really address it. So those are some of the examples of the things they have to take into consideration when you're designing a program for them. So you may not just go in and teach jiu-jitsu or Thai boxing, some Jeet Kune Do, Wing Chun, but you have to go from the culture and the environment backwards. You'll borrow elements from those different systems, but they have to fit into that structure that they will give you.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. I mean, just the topic itself. I mean, I guess it's a slight detour. Do you foresee a bit of a change, particularly in the US, with the enforcement? Maybe not enforcement is probably not the word, but use of martial arts in de-escalating situations. in general. I was listening to Joe Rogan recently. I think he had one of the Gracie family on his podcast, and they were talking about this very topic about some of the stats that he was sharing were just incredible, regarding the small amount of training that officers get in terms of de-escalating without the use of useful martial art techniques, let's say. It seems like an obvious thing to do is for them to be more experienced in that area.
Yeah, I think that they're starting to see the need more for it. And I see that because I'm getting contacted a lot more for work. And a lot of the things that are available, they're starting to look around intelligently, and they'll look at a product that they're considering and go, well, I can't do that with this vest on. And my boss said,
and this comes back to the environment thing, doesn't it?
Right. And they're additionally, they've got to have some soft level physical techniques that they have to be sharp with. And the truth is, the better they are with those, and the better they are with that verbal communication, it's layered onto it. They'll be able to keep it at a lower level of escalation. Now, of course, you're going to have individuals that their intent is to go all the way right off the bat, and you're going to have those higher levels of force available. But, in my experience talking to the guys and working with them, most of the people, they're good people that are in a challenging situation, and they really don't want to get into a physical exchange with a law enforcement officer. No. So, right. So those lower levels of force, ideas of how to put your hands on somebody and control them, but it still not be, a move that is going to force escalation right away. But again, it takes training. The officer has to take the time to get out on the mat and work the material.
And I guess that partly is down to a change in how officers are trained up as well, right? That the officer, obviously they could take it off their own, take their own time out, their own day to learn. But if it seems to me it's a little bit like nutrition and doctors. Like it would make such a difference if doctors had more than one day in their whole course learning about the power of nutrition, rather than just prescribing the first thing that and it seems like such an obvious thing, but I suppose a lot of these obvious things can take decades before they actually become implemented.
Yeah, and it's got to go through the system. They have to take the legal side into the consideration, and anything that they teach the officer, sometimes the agency is going to be held responsible for. So, they're very hesitant to make those changes, which I understand. And I assume just like the doctor too, he has to take that into consideration. So it's probably very slow process to make those changes. But as individuals, we can have our own educational process and go find out. If we see
of course,
like in health, like in diet and stuff, you may have gone and found that information on your own, and you might know more about it now than your doctor.
I'm pretty sure I do. I wanted to talk about a few. So, obviously we've learned about your backstory, Alan. I'd love to know what is it you're really focused on today, and I'd love to get into a couple of topics around just achieving success and overcoming adversity and overcoming fear, really. So, I know you're really deep into your new personal development program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we mentioned earlier what you learn on the edge of the mat or in between the classes. It's the cool thing about a martial arts environment is it will create opportunities of growth on a regular basis. You're going to be in exchange with another human being, and you're You know, your emotional system is going to be challenged, your ego is going to be challenged, and it gives you that opportunity to either do a good job at it or not do a good job at it. And sometimes, you know, we don't do a very good job learning those things, and the teacher will come up and say, hey, I'd like to make a suggestion. Have you ever thought about looking at it this way? And he starts to introduce those philosophies of growth and change that's not even related to the martial arts. It's, you know, it's related to you, which eventually will relate to your ability to be successful in everything. You know, so I started getting this information, and I would ask, well, why isn't that on the curriculum? There should be a class for that. And it's just not. So, I'm going to write it down. Did that for a long time, started teaching. And when you teach, as you know, those opportunities will show up on your mat. Things will happen, and the student, you'll go, hey, you know, I understand you're afraid of that thing, for instance, but dealing with fear is a life skill, and especially in a warrior's culture. And this is how we look at it. These are some of the philosophies that we follow. And you have a perfect opportunity to exercise it, because Thursday, we're going to get back on the mat and we're going to grapple. So now that you know it, you not only can internalize it, but you also have this incredible culture that you can safely come and practice that principle and get good at it. And then we'll take it out into the world. You may go and start a new business, start a new relationship that has nothing to do with martial arts, but that skill will be very impactful in your success and everything else. So I started teaching those things to my students, and they were like, why isn't this on the curriculum? And so, well, I was like, I have a notebook that I've made over the years that I write them down in. And I started, they would say, you need to write a book, you know, jokingly. So when I had time last year, you know, the pandemic created an opportunity to have some extra time. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do it. What else am I going to do? I'll write this book and introduce these concepts. And that led to the program, which is Warrior's Path. And the main purpose of that program is to teach those principles and concepts to everyone, not just the martial artists. So it is a place that even if you're not training, you can go and learn them and be able to implement them and have some benefit from them.
Are these like a set art, like a number of principles, Alan, or are these? Can you share a few of your secret nuggets right here?
Well, the first book really was.
We'll obviously put links to your book in the show notes as well, so people can check that out.
It was a introduction to a few of them. I'm actually writing the second one now, and it's about to go into edit. That is going to go through the big list. And, you know, you mentioned like fear, dealing with fear. And, you know, in a warrior's culture, one of the principles that you learn is to deal with the unknown. And the unknown, a lot of times, is connected to fear. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm unsure. But, you know, as warriors, we do it on a regular basis. And you are placed into scenarios and situations on the mat where you deal with it all the time. So how do you deal with it? How do you process that? And, you know, how do you not let it freeze you? Because it's one of the first things that the unknown or fear will do is create you know, you'll freeze. Well, I just won't do anything. I'm afraid to go and take action, whether it be, I'm going to try to roll and submit this 200-pounder, or, man, should I write that book? Should I start that business? Oh, I don't know, you know, but you learn that you have to deal with it and still take action. And so you have to be able to process it and still move forward. Otherwise, there's no movement toward growth or movement toward success. So
Yeah, I
that
think I
would be
think a lot of people have heard that, you know, that fight, flight, freeze, that they're aware of that, but they often don't realize that if you're let's say you're practicing that in real life and you're regularly freezing, just like whether you're regularly flying or you're regularly fighting, that can almost become habitual, and you know, without even realizing it, you're just creating these patterns of behavior that maybe aren't really progressing things.
agreed. You know, and past that is going to be, as we mentioned earlier too, failure. And you know, failure is absolutely part of success. It is actually a huge part of it. You know, like if we were to take 10 steps to success, 8 of them will probably be failures. And you know, if we are so emotionally frozen or hammered down by it, I'm not going to do it anymore, then there's no progress. So one of the things is to realize there's going to be failure. What is your attitude? What is your thought process around it? Do I let it, well, I don't know if I can, or do I, oh, that I was expecting it. You know, and part of the principle is I know it's coming and I'm going to expect it. So when it shows up, I'm going to go, oh, there's one of the failures. I guess I'll have to go over here and try another thing, instead of, oh, I failed, I just won't move forward with it anymore. And you know, just that mindset frees you up to, you know, continue taking forward action toward whatever your goal is.
Yeah, and if you get used to, you know, feeling the fear, and like, you know, and as the book goes, doing it anyway, and that becomes a habit, then that's a better habit to be constantly procrastinating, freezing, not taking action, and burying yourself deeper in the hole. Right?
Agreed. Right. And you know, consistently um, taking forward motion, because you know, it doesn't happen instantly. You know, overnight success after 20 years of being in the office, waking up early, doing the work, and then all of a sudden I make it. So that's another part of it, is realizing I'm going to deal with failure and I'm going to have to do it consistently over an extended amount of time. And that doesn't change for anyone. It's the same for everybody. So now that I understand that, let's start making the mistakes. Show them to me. You know, and we do it on the martial arts floor. We set up an environment so that we can find those mistakes sooner. You know, I want to be placed in a position where I'm going to fail more often.
And now that you've got this in place, you know, and you're using it almost as part of your curriculum in your martial arts school, are you regularly sort of trying to find out from your students what sort of life lesson progress that they're making as a result of this? Have you got any stories you can share that people have experienced?
Well, most of the guys that I've got feedback from are individuals that I'm coaching. You know, a lot of them are in the industry and they're building a business. I have a few since starting the program that are just businessmen, and they appreciate the approach from the Warriors' perspective, and so they got in touch. A lot of the guys, you know, it's the same thing you see on the mat. Building a business is, to me, very similar. You know, like they're going to be failures, and you know, sometimes you have to, well, you have to know it's coming, and when it comes, I recognize it, and it's just part of the process. So what's the next step? I understand it has to be consistent. You know, sometimes you'll try and fail, and I'll take a break. Well, that break may end up being 2 years before I finally go, you know what, I've got to go back and try that. And so, but that's not the consistency element. So I know I have to maintain consistency. I have to have a steady walk forward toward the goal, whether it be the businesses or, like we said earlier, multiple revenue streams. You know, it has to be designed intelligently. So I like to have a filter that allows me to see the 1,000-mile view of life and what is your overall goal. we have to take that in consideration so that we can implement our life units effectively, because we only have so many of them. Yeah, you could easily waste them, you know, so you need to have a process to stay on track.
Life units, I like that. Is that from your book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
You know, it's different to spend 2 or 3 hours doing nothing and spend 2 or 3 life units.
Yeah.
It helps keep me on track, because I know I've only got so many of them. And so I like to keep myself in check. For me, I actually have days that I set aside monthly, annually, where that day is specifically to take a look at everything I'm doing. What is its effectiveness? Can I make it better? Can I create a different habit? Should I adjust my routines so that I'm not wasting those life units? Because you can get caught up working in something and not on it, you know. So you might do the same thing over and over again for a year, just out of habit, before you finally realize, you know, that's maybe not producing the outcome that I was looking for. So maybe it's time to make an adjustment. If I force myself to stop and take a look at what I'm doing on a regular basis, I just put it into my schedule, because it's just a dream until you set aside time and focus a life unit or a series of them on your goal. When that happens, action starts to be taken. And so, a lot of entrepreneurial spirits, they're busy bees, right? They'll go after it. They put their head down and go forward, which is great. But you also have to set aside time in your schedule to back out to that 1,000-mile view and look at the effectiveness of everything that you're doing, right? Make those little tweaks and adjustments, and it will quickly, and this is the same thing with the guys that I've coached, it helps them quickly realize where there may be leaking life units and energy. They can take that and direct it and achieve more with less and get there quicker because of the organization.
How long have you been sort of implementing that sort of strategy in your own life, Alan? I mean, has that just been like something that you've, over the course of time, you've just found that, you know, with more personal development work and more work on yourself, that you've just started to implement these different things over time?
Well, you know, I'll implement it as I learned, but I've always tried to have a process that helped me be effective. And, you know, obviously, as I learned and polished and got better, it got better, and I was able to achieve more, both in the martial arts, in business, in your relationship, your health. You know, there's different areas that you have to make sure you're putting energy into to maintain them. So it's one of the things I like to use is what I call a master filter. And every decision you make goes through the master filter. But, you know, I have to take the family into consideration. One of the things on that filter is called freedom. And so I have to weigh the freedom I'm giving away. Like if I'm going to start this new business, it may take 4 hours a week out of my time. Is it worth it? And once I've built it, will it require more time that I have to invest, or have I designed the business model in a way that I will have more freedom later? And that's ultimately what we want, is to create more freedom and more financial support. So if we know that in advance, we can build that blueprint to have that outcome. Otherwise, you know, it's like, as an example, we talked about starting a professional martial arts business. There's guys, they'll have that 400 students, but they're working 7 days a week and they don't get home at night till 10.
Yeah.
So yes, you've achieved it, but you're sacrificing family, health, and your freedom. And so 10 years later, you're out of balance and you kind of go, man, I'm tired of this.
Yeah. One of my, I think, probably one of the best things that happened to me in my early years as a personal trainer was working with some extremely wealthy multi-millionaires and people who had very successful businesses, and seeing how different ones would cope, and also seeing the other side of it, that the crazy hours that they worked, the amount of time that they didn't spend at home with their family, the impact that it may have on their relationships, on their health, and the sort of the hit home that there's a price to be paid for everything. And not to say that you can't be extremely wealthy and still look after all those things, but generally it's a big ask. And so ultimately, whether you've got your own business or you have a job, it doesn't really matter. But defining what success means to you is such an important life lesson that we all need to be reminded of, like, every day, every month, at least every year, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's they say it's got to be balanced. Obviously money helps, but freedom helps too, so what do you want your life to look like? Does it include a 9 to 5 every day? And if it does, then that's okay. That's your plan. But you may say, I would like to be able to do these things more often. Maybe I want a 4-day weekend, or I would like to have a month or 2 off every year. That is obtainable. You just want to be able to sit down and intelligently build your plan so that the outcome is what you have in mind. And it's okay to put in that billionaire's work ethic. Like for me, with the book and the new business, I'm working a lot right now. But I can see that there's going to be a curve once things are built and the boat starts to move. It will slow down a little bit.
There's ebbs and flows, isn't there? There's ebbs and flows, and I think that's probably the bigger difference maybe for any business owners listening, is obviously it's quite a different life than maybe the 9 to 5. You can shut down your laptop at 5 o'clock and go home and not worry, and that's you done. It's if you're deciding to commit to running your own show, then in theory we could be working all the hours that we want. But ultimately the upside is if you choose a business career that you're passionate about, then much like right now, it doesn't feel like work. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'm getting to learn. I'm getting to talk to people like yourself. I'm getting to learn myself. So it's it's amazing. Like you said before we even started the podcast, it's just amazing that you can create this life. And this is one of the reasons why I do this podcast, is to kind of spread the word, for anyone that's sort of, I speak to a lot of people and that they want to do their own thing. They want to start their own journey. They want to have more freedom. They want to have more autonomy over time. And I remember years ago as a PT, often the biggest challenge that people had, it wasn't really about the fact that they were eating the wrong foods, they weren't exercising enough. It was about the fact that they didn't have the autonomy of time to choose the time correctly because of what their work was asking of them and because of the environment that they had at work. And that was the thing that was really affecting all of the other habits. Yep. But who was I to say as a young 20-year-old, well, you should probably change your career when they've got a mortgage and kids and family to support, Yep. But, I do really truly believe now that, you can make, you just have to do what you said. You have to make these plans, right?
Yeah, I agree. Anything's obtainable, but there's work, especially in the beginning, depending on what your situation is. You just have to have a intelligent plan, the process, build the habits, build the routines, and do it consistently. That's one of the things, is to know it's going to take time, and it's going to take consistent effort. It's like we said, devote X amount of time to whatever you're doing on a consistent basis moving forward, and you will start to have forward action. and it will eventually lead to where you want to be. And like we said, there's going to be some deviations. Some things are not going to work. Some plans are going to change. Expect it. You're going to have moments that's going to be fearful. You know, it's like, say you have that full-time job and you've built an additional revenue stream or maybe two, and the finances are to the point where I could take the leap or not. And that moment is huge for a lot of people when you say, okay, I'm going to go for it, or I think I'll stay where it's safe. You know, and
that's where the fear kicks in, isn't it? And the thing is with fear, it's kind of a funny thing, really, because obviously, you know, 10,000 years ago, the fear was really real, right? We were fighting for our lives, maybe running away from a saber-toothed tiger or something. But, you know, these days, fear is almost hidden. Like we hold it within us, and it's not life and death fear. It's the fear of, you know, taking that leap to, you know, cut short the career that you don't enjoy anymore, and follow your passion and put yourself out there, whether it be on social media or speaking or starting a podcast, or, you know, it's a very different type of fear that I guess we've grown to create this new fear.
Well, I mean, it is life and death still.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's like if I give into it and I kind of fall back to my everyday monotonous routine, it's not changing. I don't feel like I'm going anywhere. And, you know, you get into that mind space. That's
such an important point you've made there. It's the fear isn't life and death in the moment, but in you know, those bad habits, you know, where they can lead to some dark places, right?
Definitely. And, you know, and it's not living. You are alive, but, you know, we're passion driven individuals, and man, there's nothing like that. You know, when you finally get a place where you're doing what you want to do, it gives you energy. It makes puts more flavor in life. There's more light, more gratitude, and it's, to me, it is life or death. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, you've changed my thoughts on that. I think that was a really good point that you made there. You mentioned earlier that, like, a few times, the Warriors culture. So is that something that you've developed in your school? Is that your thing that you've been really kind of one of the principles around everything that you teach is within this Warriors culture?
Yes, you know, a lot of what the information in the book was, and same thing on this next one too. It's presented from a warrior's perspective, and, you know, their culture would look at things a little differently than like a non-warrior culture. You know, as far as physical fitness, they have to be ready. You know, dealing with fear, they know they're going to. And, you know, I think too, they don't really look in a warrior's culture at dealing with fear like, how am I going to deal with it? Their mindset is, I'm going after it. I want to create an environment where I have to deal with it on a regular basis because I want to be good at it. So where can I find the opportunity to deal with it more? And if I can, I'm going to create it, because as a warrior and in that culture, your job is to get out there and you're going to deal with it more. So I think that's the difference in that culture than in other cultures, is that they'll seek it out. They seek the unknown and they'll place themselves there on a regular basis, and it becomes habit. You know, like we talk about dealing with fear, and, you know, you have an internal process in your mind. You go, this is how I'm going to deal with it. I'll think this, I'll breathe this way, and I'll deal with it. And that becomes a habit. If you don't actively design those rituals and habits, then what you're getting is just by the wayside how it's developed. And, you know, that's not necessarily the best. in the warriors culture, they say, I know that I need better internal habits of dealing with unknown or dealing with the fear. So I'm going to go after them instead of waiting on life to give it to me. So, but when I am presented a situation in life where here it is, oh, I already have the internal habits that my reaction may be the proper reaction because I've created the environment to train it and deal with it. And when the moment does arrive, instead of going, oh, here it is, I'll deal with it. They go, oh, there it is. That's what I've trained for. It's finally here. Let's deal with it. Let's go. Different perspective.
And when you talk about warriors, the warriors culture, what have you studied, and where is this information like really based on?
My experience, probably 40 plus years in martial arts, both of myself, but quite honestly, one of the biggest things is teaching. And, as you know, inside of the school, you have different personalities that'll come in, and all of them go through the same gauntlet. They're all presented with the same situations on the mat. One deals with it one way, one deals with it the other. But both of them come to you and go, how can I be better? I'm afraid to do this. What can I do? And then you just have some that are just fearless, but they may have troubles in another area. So teaching and sharing those that information and those philosophies over the years with those different personalities, that developed this list of principles, this program. So
fantastic. I mean, I guess just to finish things up, I mean, you're a great testimony to all of this. I mean, you talked about how rowdy you were as a kid and how much trouble you got in. And I'm sure anyone listening can agree, like you have very, just talking to you have a very calming nature, very sort of at one with yourself clearly. And, your whole experience of implementing all of this into your life has obviously helped channel all of that from your younger days and made you become the person you are today.
Yeah. That rowdiness, that high level, it's a gift. At the time they wanted to drug it, they were like, man, put this kid on some drugs to calm him down.
Well, in all seriousness, that's probably what would happen today, right? They'll be put on Ritalin or some sort of, they'll be labeled as ADHD or something like this. Yep. I'm imagining that you would be able to spot a child like that very quickly who would, yeah.
And it's one of the talks when the time comes, it's a gift, really. As you go down the journey and you get older, one of the challenges is energy, your daily amounts of energy. So, like I just turned 51 and, we're starting to look at how can I get a little more energy? Well, what are the processes, the daily routines, the diet that helps me have more? But these kids are gifted with a tremendous source of go and energy. And the problem is it's like water pressure going through a fire hydrant. If it's too much, it can't handle it. So what they have to do is learn to deal with it, to harness it, to control it. And then if they can focus it, I mean, the possibilities are limitless. It's like, I know individuals like that now, and they get up at 6 a.m. and they're still going at 2 a.m. and they're okay with it. That's just who they are. But,
I think I recently listened to another podcast with Joe Polish, and he had a guy on, and he said that ADD is a superpower.
I agree.
Superpower, and I think, I think anyone, particularly any parent listening to this, if you think that your child has, or has been diagnosed with ADD, I think it's such an important point. I think martial arts is an absolute game changer to channel that energy, and that, like you said, about control, self-control, you can utilize that energy for the greater of good.
Yeah. And is it a challenge? It is. and that's what overwhelms, from my experience, I see it overwhelms a lot of parents, because having to deal with all of the energy, and, they're children, they don't really know what's going on. They just know that I can't control this. So yeah, it is an extra challenge to learn yourself and to pass on information to the child. How to, well, first and foremost, is just recognizing it, and then teaching them methods to learn to deal with it, to self-regulate it, instead of just say, hey, here's a pill. Because
Yeah.
they don't ever learn at that point. You pretty much become addicted to that thing to help deal with it. And if you can learn processes and internal procedures to do it, which is a challenge at a younger age, but it is possible. Think about that. That's, that's going to be skill sets and life lessons that child will take forward for the rest of their life. And on top of that, when they start to get a little older and they have the ability to contain it, focus, and direct that energy to what they want. I mean, I want some of that.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's like you said, it is surely. I'm sure it is very hard for parents, but if they can go through that stage and help channel that energy, then it's going to pay everyone back so much in the future. So it's been so awesome talking to you, Alan. I just love to finish off. Like, can you just tell our listeners about your personal development program and who specifically benefits from it?
Well, the program is called Warrior's Path. Anybody can benefit from it. I learned it in the culture of the martial arts, but one of the reasons I built the program, I'd see the benefit that my students had from it. I had shared it with my peers in the industry, and they saw the benefit. But there's a lot of people who don't make it through the academy door. So my goal was to put the program together in a way that anyone could benefit from it. And the way it works is I'm training coaches that can deliver the information as well as myself. So I'm trying to multiply my ability to help more people. So a lot of times we'll do it through coaching sessions. We have events where we'll have like a coaching or mentor event. Right now it's here in Atlanta, Georgia, 4 times a year. We do have the ability for guys to Zoom in. We've had a few that started to do that. And the other possibility to get introduced to it is the book. It introduces a small piece of it. And like a lot of the things that I couldn't put into the book the first time, the next one is going to have the complete list, so people can reference it.
Wow. And just specifically, if someone's listening, how would they know that this could be right for them?
Well, there's a lot of self-improvement programs out there, and they come from different perspectives. You have to find the culture and perspective that fits you. So you will do it and you will make change. A lot of the guys that gravitate toward Warrior's Path, they appreciate the Warrior's approach to it. They're looking for that flavor of self-improvement. So they have the personality that's the type of culture that they fit into.
Nice. Fantastic. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure our listeners have done too. We'll put all of the links, etc., to your book and your program. And is there anywhere specifically people can find you online?
My website is sifualanbaker.com, sifualanbaker.com.
Fantastic. Well, one last question I always like to ask: what resource, whether it be book, course, mentors, are the biggest influence on your life?
Mentors.
Mentors.
Right away. They are, books are great, but if you can get a mentor It is living knowledge. One of the principles that I teach is the difference between a moon student and a sun student. A moon student reflects light. The sun student is creating light. Mentors generally, especially if they're very successful, are creators. They're changing what's happening in their industry. And that hasn't made it into books yet. And by the time it is, they're changing it again. So if you get a good mentor, you are getting right at the source of that creative energy. And not only that, they're going to probably be pretty passionate. And, you know, if you get around a passionate individual, you get energy and passion. So a good mentor is going to supply you with that.
Yeah.
And they're going to motivate you. They're also going to be the type of person that probably hold you accountable. You know, they're going to go, did you do what you said you're going to do? But that's just those types of personalities. So by far, good mentors or a good coach. That's how I like to train my coaches, of the same philosophy.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Alan, thanks again. And we'll catch up soon.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate it.
Take care.